Good afternoon, students. It's Mrs. Cinti, and I am going to talk to you today about fraction sense, meaning this really is as straightforward as it sounds. We're going to be trying to figure out, okay, if a fraction that we're given, like 11/21 or something like that, is closer to 1 or a half or 0, okay? And it will help us in our estimations. If you're told that you are going to get a part of a pie that is that's like 9/12, right? The question is that closer to a whole pie? Is that closer to half a pie? Is that closer to just basically no pie, right? So that's all we're doing is we're trying to figure out how to round fractions into ones, halves, or zeros, right? So where are we closer to? That's really all that this section is today. Okay, so we want to just have some vocabulary. We use these guys as something called a benchmark. And so a benchmark is just in life, you should know, is a standard or point of reference against which things may be compared or assessed, okay? And so these benchmarks are going to be these guys, which I told you, 0, 1/2, and 1, or -1 and -1/2. So depending on kind of which side of the scale we're looking at, are fractions closer to 1 or to all of those other ones, okay? So let's go ahead and just jump into vocabulary, of course, is numerator and denominator, and those will be fairly crucial when we look at our rules. And the rules may be helpful and the rules may not. It may be so logical to you that you don't really need to look at the rules. But the question is, so one homework type of question will be something like, is 11/16 closer to 1, 1/2, or 0? Okay, so the notes that you're going to be taking today is just these rules. And again, I want you to put them in your notes, but they may or may not be helpful, but they will be just to help us think about it. It will be nice to identify what you are using as benchmarks. Okay, so rule number 1 is if the numerator is much less than the denominator, then the fraction is closer to 0. Okay, that's rule number 1. And so meaning if you have like 1/16, right? The numerator is actually much less. It's way low compared to the size of the denominator. Okay, so 1 is a lot closer to 0 than to 16. Okay, so if you look at a scale of 0 to 16, a number line, and you look at where 1 is, 1's over here very close to 0. So that's what tells us that that this fraction is closer to having nothing, no pie at all, versus having a whole heck of a lot of pie. Number 2, since we're close to number 2 is if the numerator is close to half the denominator, then the fraction is closer to 1/2. Okay, so meaning if you have something like 7/16 in this example, what you want to do is you want to look and say, okay, well, the denominator, the whole denominator is 16. If I were to divide this in 2, it would be 8. So is 7 close to half of the denominator? And the answer is 7 is really close to 8. 7 is a lot closer if you look at that number line, right? Sorry, so slanted. If this is 0, this is 16. Half of 16 is 8. Whereas this number is very close to 7. It's very close to 8. 7 is right here. So that means that you really are halfway between 0 and 1, because as you know, 16 over 16 would be equal to 1. So that's why, that's another way to check and see if you're close to a half. And then our third rule is if the numerator is close to the value of the denominator, your fraction is close to 1. Okay, and so let's go ahead and look at the negative side. So if you have something like negative 15 18ths, let's say. If you look at your number line again, here is 0. Here is 18, so the denominator kind of just determines, negative 18. The denominator kind of determines where your number line. Half of 18 is 9, so half of negative 18 would be negative 9. And then you have the number 15, so you're looking at the numerator and how close it is to this. So 15 would maybe be right here, negative 15. So the fact that you're closer to the denominator than you are to halfway between or to 0 tells you that you're closer, this fraction is closer to the number 1, to a whole. And so the kind of concepts behind this is if we had negative 5, and then you were adding negative 15 18ths, right? Are you going to be closer to a negative 6? Are you going to be closer to a negative 5? Are you going to be closer to a negative 5.5? Right? That's kind of the idea behind this. And so since this can be rounded to negative 1 because it's closer to negative 1, not closer to negative 1/2, you would then add the negative 5 to the negative 1, and you would get your average to be around negative 6, or your rounded answer would be around negative 6. Okay? So this is one type of example. However, going back to the original, so those are all the different rules. Going back to the original, is 11/16 closer to 1, 1/2, or 0? You know, you can in your mind say, okay, half of 60, so this is close, right? It's close to maybe 1. It's close to maybe 1/2. It's definitely not close to 0 because it's not like 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, right? So how do we determine this? You could say, half of 16 is 8, so is 11 closer to 8, or is it closer to 16? You know, and it's not necessarily it is intuitive, but you know, the same. Here's 16, here's 0, and then you have 8, 9, 10, 11 here. So this is, you know, 3 steps this way versus, so this is where 11 would be, versus 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So this would be 5 steps away. So you're actually closer to the half. Okay, so that's another way to figure that out. Okay, so that's one type of example problem that you will be asked. Another type of example problem that you'll be asked is tell whether the fraction is closer to all of these examples. And so it brings in negatives. So negative 8 over 14. Okay. And so you could draw the number line. I like it when you draw that. Obviously, here's 14. You are in the negative scale anyway, so you're going to be on a negative kind of here. Half of 14 is negative. Half of negative 14 is negative 7. Here you are. Negative 8 is right here. So you are pretty much close to negative 1/2 is the way that you would show your work for that. It's a little more. And the way you would say it is a little more than negative 1/2. Okay, that would be the answer that I'd be looking for. Another example would be 3/28. Okay, this is definitely very small, not close to half, which would be half of this is 14. So you would say that this is closer to that would be your answer there. Okay, another type of problem, two more type of problems that you might have. Another type of problem is estimate a fraction to the nearest half. So here you have, so the example problem, estimate this fraction to the nearest half. And the way that I'm going to ask you to do this is to go ahead and round the denominator, okay, to a whole number, or this is a whole number, but round it to a nice, beautiful number. So 90 is here, okay, and go ahead and round this to a number. So, let's look at zeros and fives are the way that we would round it. If you were to look at these two and reduce this, 45 is in fact half of 90, so you know that it's very close to 1/2, okay? And then example number 4 that you'll be looking at is to replace the question mark with a number that forms a fraction close to 1. And so an example type problem would be something like this. What would you put here to make this fraction be close to 1? You could say 13 out of 14 would work just as well because this is close to 1. Another way that you could be asked is this was filling in the numerator. What if you were asked to fill in the denominator? So let's say that this is 8 over question mark, and you want it to be close to 1, or you want it to be close to 1/2, let's say. Okay, so what would you put here to have this be close to 1/2? And you could say maybe 16. 8/16 would be reduced to 1/2 anyways. So you would put in for that question mark 16. Okay, so super straightforward. Good luck with the homework, and I will see you in the next section.